What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Drive Talk Cars. And in today's episode, I'm going to show you how to save money by replacing your own valve covers and gaskets on the E63. So let's get into it. So as you can see, the valve cover is down here and we have all this stuff on top, the air box and the air snorts and some other things that we need to remove first before accessing the valve cover. So the tools for this job is pretty simple. You need some extensions, you need a ratchet, or you can do a power ratchet. You need some T-bits, a T25, a T30, and you need a socket, which is a 6mm. And that's it. So the first thing we have to remove is the mass airflow harness, which is held on by a clamp underneath here on the passenger side. If you're on the driver's side, it's on top, but passenger side is underneath. So you just squeeze that, hear it click, and then pull that apart. And just set the harness to the side so you don't get in the way if you can. So now we need to loosen up this clamp here that goes around the air box. You can use a screwdriver, a flathead screwdriver, or what I like to use is a 6mm socket. That just makes it a lot easier to take off. And you just loosen it up, like I said. You don't have to take it all the way off. So once you loosen that up, then you just pull this out. So now we're going to take off the bolts, these here, holding the air cover in place. Using the T25 bit, we're going to remove the bolts. For the one in the back, we're going to use our extension. All right, so we're going to take our snorkel off. You just pull forward, comes apart there, and then just comes out. So we already took the bolts off of the cover, removed the harness for the mass airflow sensor, and loosened up the clamp. So now we can just pull up on that. And if this is loose enough, let's give it a little wiggle, and it comes out. If you have a vacuum, this is a great time to vacuum out the air box. As you can see, it gets pretty messy. Since you have it off, might as well clean it. All right, so once you have that vacuum out and everything, this box here at the bottom here, it just pops out. So it's held on by a clip right here, and that clip goes on right here. So to be completely transparent, the valve cover has been broke for some time, and I was able to put a band-aid on it by putting a little bit of JB Weld on it because someone previously to me owning the car over-torqued the valve cover on one of the bolts and it cracked it. So it was a minor crack. However, over time, that's a temporary fix. It has gone bad. So now we're at this point to where I just need to go ahead and replace it. But there was a back order on the passenger side valve cover for whatever reason, I don't know. And I haven't been able to find it until now. So this is why we're changing it now. And I'll show you the crack a little bit more in detail once we take the valve cover off. You can see here the JB Weld that I applied to the cracks. You can see there's a little bit of oil coming out, so it's not completely sealed like it should be. So it's creating a little small leak. So once we clear the space and get this all open, next we have to take off the ignition coils. We have 4 of them on each bank with 2 screws holding each one in place. These are not torqued very tight, so you don't have to use a power tool. I'm just using it for taking it off and speeding up the process. But when I put it back on, I typically use a manual tool, that way I don't over torque it and break it like the other bolt was broken on the valve cover. So these bolts, we're going to use a T25 torque bit. Well, make sure you don't drop those as well. All right, so we have that, and there's a little foam piece that just comes right up. All right, so once you take the bolts out, or before you take them out, you can remove this harness here. Each coil pack has one on it. And you want to press down on this clamp here. Be careful not to break this, because then you may experience other issues. But you push down on that and then it comes off. I just pull it out That way I have a little bit more leverage. Push this down, and they come out like that. So once you take off each coil pack, just put them to the side somewhere safe. You don't want them to get dirty, so just keep them in there. Now your harness may or may not come off that easily, as well as your coil pack may not come out as easily as well, but mine's come out because I have done work on this before, so it's not as tight. Also, I put grease in there when I replaced the spark plugs. That way it'll allow for this to come out easily like it is now. And that's why you do that, because you don't want to pull too hard on these, because you can tear the boot. Alright, so it's a little dirty in here, so I'm going to dust all this prior to taking it off. That way we don't get any dirt or contaminants inside the engine when we're trying to take it off. Alright, so now that we have everything removed, we can see the bolts for the most part. But if you go down here, you can't see the bolts. And that is because this harness here is blocking it. And if you can see right here, there is a clamp that holds this harness right here in place. There's one there, and then there's one right here. Now, you can break the zip tie to loosen this, or you can just pull the clamp off. What I typically do is just slide the clamp off, just using a screwdriver or something like that. And then that will give you room to take this harness off, and you can see the remaining bolts. So let's take those clips off, and then we're ready to take the cover off. You saw how easy that just slides right off? And that one slides off as well. So now we can access these bolts. Let me show you. So with the clamp off, now you can move this harness back, and as you can see, there's bolts. Now we can get to those bolts down there. And there's one over here in the corner as well. There's one right down there in the back down over here. So now the only thing left to do is remove the bolts off the valve cover, and then we can take it off. So for that, we're going to use our torque bit, the T30. Now for some of these, when we get down here, we're going to have to use the extension. So now that the top row is loosened, we can work on the bottom row of bolts. There's one in this corner here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's one in the far back here. So for those, I would advise using a extension, or the power tool really comes in handy, the power ratchet, because you don't have to ratchet, you can just hold the trigger. So let's get into those now. So for this corner bolt here, there's one right down in here behind this wiring. You would have to take off this bolt here, and that will remove the bracket that is holding that in place, this bracket right here. So once you take that off, then you have more space for down in here to remove that bolt. And I'll show you that. So to get to that bracket I was talking about, we have an 8mm socket. Alright, you want to make sure you don't lose this or drop it down in there. I've done that before, and it sucks. I mean, it's no biggie. You can just take a magnet and find it. So that's the bolt there. Okay, so with that bolt gone, now you can see that the bracket can move, and you can expose this bolt down there, right there. So at this point, we're halfway there. Now we just got to take those bolts at the bottom off, and then this will come off, and we'll just replace the gasket and the new cover. So at this point, we're going to use our extension just to get down there on some of these parts. So right here, it's a little easier to get to. This one might be too long. See if I can get it without the extension. All right, I was able to get it without the extension. This tool is a lifesaver, because normally before I had this, I had to do it with the traditional ratchet, and it can be tough to ratchet in these tight quarters. I'll have a link to this tool in the description down below in case you want to get one. I suggest you do. All right, so we have a heat shield right here that is kind of presenting an issue to those last remaining bolts back there. It's kind of tight for this tool here to fit in there. So we're gonna get an extension and maybe a swivel joint to make it accessible. So let's see. So what I did here was get a swivel socket, put my bit on the tip, and then I have an extension, and that'll give me that flex that I need to bend at an angle. Then I'm gonna put it to my power ratchet here and see what we get. All right, so let's see if this works. The hardest part is getting it seated into the bolt. All right. All right, so we got that loose. Let's try it without the power tool. You have to make sure that you don't tear up the bolt. Even though I got new ones with the new valve cover, I don't want to tear these up to where I can't get it off. So just be patient with this. This is, ironically or not, this is the easier side in my opinion than the other side. Once you break the bolt, you can pretty much just use your hand and just hand turn it to loosen it up. So I got that out. Got this one. All right, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then we have one over here on the side, in the very back. So this by far is the hardest part of the job, getting these last few bolts out. So with the short extension, maybe I can use the power tool now. Might not need any extension, actually. So let's try without the extension. That's risky. That's asking for my knuckles to get messed up. All right. Well, that was wishful thinking, but it didn't work. Let's try this. All right. Using our swivel joint and torque bit, we were able to get it. All right, so we should have all bolts loosened. Now we just pull up. Maybe some that need a little loosening just to make sure that they're all the way out. So now the bolts can come all the way out, but typically this stopper here keeps them in place, but just be mindful if you don't want to drop them to take this out. But typically speaking, you should be okay. But maybe the bottom ones you would take out just to make sure you don't drop them. All right, looks like we have it all loose. Put it flat like this so you don't drop nothing down in the engine. And you're good. So now that we have this all exposed, you want to make sure that you cover it up if you're going to be spending some time cleaning up the area, stuff like that. We don't want any type of contaminants getting inside of the engine. These do come off. They fell off from the old valve cover. So just remove those. Like I said, we want to cover this up. So I'm going to put just some paper towel across it to make sure nothing gets inside of it. You can use a towel, whatever you have, but just cover it up so we don't get anything inside of the engine. So leave that there for now, and then we're gonna work on getting the new cover. So if you haven't done so already, check out DriveTalkCars.com. That way you can get your own merch just like this. I have hoodies, t-shirts, jet tags, and stickers. So check it out. Back to the video. So we have the old valve cover off. As you can see, there was some issues going on right here. It was compromised, and I JB welded, as I mentioned earlier, to try to rectify this issue. It worked for a while, but over time, you know, it started breaking down. Just the plastic contracting and expanding and all that probably wore it down, and now I'm at the point to where I need to fully replace the cover. And you might can see a little bit there. You can see the oil starting to come through. And you may be wondering, well, how did I know that I even had a crack? So I did a smoke test on the system, and smoke was escaping out of this portion right here. So that's how I knew I had the leak. Now we're at the point to where we can go ahead and replace it. There's a few things to note when you're replacing from the old one. So the new one did come with new bolts, so I don't have to change those out. But one thing that it did not come with was the stopper or the holder for the bottom of the air box. So I'm going to take this off and transfer it over to the new one. So I don't know if you can see that well, but there's a crack in there. and that's where the air was escaping. So on the top you could really see it. Underneath you couldn't see it because this is where the gasket was covering up in here. So now you can actually see where it was escaping from. Hopefully, if I can get the angle just right. There we go. So crack there, and there's a little crack over here too. So let's switch it out and put the new one in. So using our T25, we're gonna remove this bolt right here. T25. All right, so now we can take this and put it on a new one. All right, so we're gonna put this on there. All right, so now we have it on there, and we should be good to go to install the new cover. So as you can see here, the new gasket has already been put on the cover. Replace the spark plug ports gasket as well as the main gasket right here. So let's put it on. All right, so we can remove our little paper towel here. One thing you may want to do is clean the rim here. A lot of debris collects, so when we put it in, we don't want that to fall into here. So you just want to be careful to make sure that it doesn't fall and you're breaking it up and it's falling into the engine. All right, now so we're just going to put the back end first. Make sure you move the harness down here below. All right, line up the holes. Make sure it's flat on the bottom here. All right, so before we screw it down, we want to make sure that we can pull the harness and that it doesn't connect on anything. There we go. That way you can ensure that any of the wires are not being pinched underneath the cover. All right, it's in there. Now all we have to do is seal it up and not over torque bolts like someone else did. So initially I'm just gonna use my hand ratchet to ensure that I don't over torque it or over screw it and potentially break this one. So really initially you can just use your hand to tighten it down. And we don't need to get it all the way tight. We're just getting it snug. All right, so I have it all snug now. And what I'm gonna do is use our torque wrench to torque down the bolts on the valve cover. And per the specs, it should be 10 Newton meters, which is about 7.3 foot-pounds of torque. So as you see here, I have 5, then plus 2 will make it 7 foot-pounds of torque. So you're gonna hear a click. If you have a manual one, if you have a digital one, I think it's a beep. That's how you can tell when your bolts are torqued. So I'm just gonna go through all of them and make sure they're torqued to spec. All right, now that we have everything torqued down, we're gonna put everything back. Our clamps right here for our harness goes back right there. Don't forget to put your bolt back for your bracket down here. Next, we put our ignition coils back in. All right, then we can put our bolts back in. So remember, don't over tighten these. It might even be best just to use a hand tool. That way you don't over tighten them. It's just real tight. You can put your harnesses back on there. I'm gonna put it on there till it clicks. So now all we have to do is just put the air filter box back on, plug it in, tighten up that, we're done. Don't forget to put your mat here down. Just goes down like that. Then we put our box down. Remember, there's a little clamp that goes right on here. Then we put our air box back on. We'll make sure that that's on there good, sealed all the way around. Then we plug our mass airflow back up. Put our bolts back in here to hold down the box cover. Perfect. Then we tighten our clamp up. And the last piece is going to be our holes here for the air intake. And we're done. So if you like this video, please give me that thumbs up. And if you want to see more videos like this, please check these videos out over here. And remember, do it until you can't. Until next time, I'm out.